didn't record.
Okay, I apologize for that. We are holding in Pasuk Yudches. We're reading the Mari Kra on page 354 at the bottom. Hayu li Beis Yisrael, Nevuzu Nemra al Shenisharu Bigolas Tzidkiyahu. Now remember, a whole bunch of Jews went out, and who went out? The best went out with Tzidkiyahu. He says, Shekulam hayu basigim shel nechoshes shel barzel v'yoferish shekulam hayu rishaim. He says, these over here, they're all bad. The good all left with Tzidkiyahu. He's telling you this is not the choice, the choicest people of Klal Yisrael. And by the way, I've been finding more and more the charm in Metzudas David. You know, it used to be, I guess, because we had those little Nevi'im with the marbleized cardboard covers, right? And they had Rashi, and it had Metzudas David, Metzias Zion. Right. I don't remember what else it had, and not a lot of anything else. So I kind of devalued it, but I was really clearly wrong. So listen to what he says. L'sig, he says, remember again, that's the dross, that's the impurity. That's Metzudas David in the bottom of 354. The first wide line in Metzudas David. Mitchila, keshahotzesim mi Mitzrayim, when originally God took you out of Egypt, hayu mishubachim kakesef. You were as praiseworthy, as wonderful as silver. But when I put you into that furnace, into the refiner, with Son Lomar, Kasher Hivesim El Eretz. He said, when I brought you to Israel, Navchuli Yosig, you turned into the dross. You're no longer silver. Kilkalu Ma'asehem, and he says, Kulam, taking the words of the Pasuk, he says, all of them did the wrong things. Kol Beis Yisrael Na'asu B'toch HaKur Nechoshes Obedul. He says, all of you became copper, Nechoshes, or Bedul, tin, Bedil, Barzel, iron, Oferis. He says, you all became one of the base metals. With some Lomar, Kulam Kilkalu Biartzam, Im Kiyesh Atach Lafus, Mabarish Bipachos Vioser. His chalfus, it was a conversion into what was bad. They all became something less than they were, not good. Bikomakom, kulam hayu basigim el mul hakesef. They were the impurities within the silver. Ein echad behem miyasher dacho kasher mitchila. Not one of them. Who's them? You'll see in the next section. Not one.
But these are the people who stayed when Ezekiel was taken.
These are the people who left.
Oh, right.
So not one of them straightened out their act. Not one of them straightened out their act. So he says, now the Malbim brings you a mashal, pages 355 and 356. The Malbim says, on the last line in Yud Ches, Shemitzaref lahasir hasigim bekur sheespo kesef. If you want to refine in a furnace the dross to get out the inferior byproduct, sheespo kesef, in which there is within silver, uyashlich kol hasigim, you're going to throw all of the impurity into the pot. And continuing, he says on page 357, he says, Yisha'er rak hakesef. When they're all out, all you can have left is silver. Avol hamitzarev sigim bekur oni. But if you put them into a poor cauldron, what does that mean? If you put, it's Geigo, garbage in, garbage out. He says, there's no silver whatsoever. Rakulo sigim, it's all these four base metals. Hulo yashlik racha sigim agruim legamre. It's not going to throw in only all the bad stuff, because what are you going to get out? Nothing. skip 2 lines. V'chein, im yitztaref Hashem es hador sheyesh bo tzadikim u'rushaim. Let's say God throws into the cauldron the generation that has good people, has bad people. Yichales rishayim yanich tzadikim. Makes sense. Silver, it's got bad stuff in it. Am Yisrael, good, got bad stuff in it. He says you're going to melt out the bad. Avolim kulam einam tzadikim. What if there isn't a tzaddik over there? Od yivarer mi shehem tzadikim le'erach anshe doram. What are you going to do? You're going to clarify those who are relatively tzadikim. La'orech, in accordance with the value of anshe doram, people of their generation. Harishayim, shem nechshavu kikesef liumas hagruim be'echleit. The worst people are better than the worster people. It says v'zehu shamar achar shehayu li beis Yisrael lesig shehem kulam sigim. All no good. All inferior metal. Rak sheyesh basigim ha'ela kama minim chashuvim. He says, so in this pile of impurity, there were a couple of good types of metal. What are they? Nechoshes, copper, ubedil. He says tin, ubarzel, iron, oferis, lead. Al yidei shenachtim betoch kur l'tzorfam. We're going to throw them all into the pot. We're going to melt them down. Al yidei kain hasigim kesef ayu. So by throwing them into the pot, you're going to get silver out of the picture. He says, nechshavu hasigim kikesef. He says, well, what's the nimshal? Hasigim habilti gruim kolkach tovim kakesef l'umas hagruim mehem. The not so bad look good next to the baddest. The kivun bazeh al tziruf, on the smelting, the beirur, the purification harishon, shetzarfam the eis golus yechanya. The first purification came when we took out the good. Now, we may think that the best were left in Eretz Yisrael. Not so. The best were taken above Bavel. Shehotzi mehem hu hacharosh hamasker hatovim shebehem dehiglom. He says Bavel. He took the best of the people and he brought it to Bavel. Behem hayu kesef neged hasigim shnishvu b'Yerushalayim. Compared to what was left, they were silver. They weren't really silver. They might have been, I don't know, copper. But compared to lead, copper is like silver, or some other mushel like that.
It's like the famous debate about Noah. Tzaddik haya b'dorotav. So
right.
Yeah, was Noah really a tzaddik or not?
That's right. That's right. Was Noah a tzaddik or not? I'll tell you one thing was better than me. No question about it. I'm glad it was enough to me. Now, if you notice on page 357, look up at the Radak. Remember what it said in Rashi on page 354? He says, to find sig on 354 in Rashi, ta'arovas, a mixture pistolas of waste products, and the urav that is combined within kesef de zahav, gold and silver and gold. I want you to see what Radak has to say about this on page 357, first column, right before, about 5 lines from where it says lo'chein to begin a paragraph. He says, the zochar kesef, below zachar zahav. So why did the pasuk mention kesef, silver, not gold? He says, shehu naki mikol kli hamatechos. He says, because it's clean. It doesn't have any impurity. Gold doesn't. V'chein amar, b'choneni kizahav eitzei. It is yet b'choneni. He says, gold is, without using the same term, gold's the gold standard. Gold doesn't have any impurities. That's why he called them silver. Says a Radak. He says, Lefi shelo Yisrael dor achar dor. Lo was not one generation shall you kazahav. Alaka kesef. We were not. You know why silver sells for X dollars an ounce and gold sells in many, many, many multiples? Because gold is pure, silver is not.
Not true.
And
It's not true.
again,
Not true.
do tell.
He's a scientist. You know.
What are carrots in gold?
Isn't that what the bunnies eat?
Uh, no, it's gold is rated by how pure it is. The purer it is, the softer it is. But
Well, yes,
Like-
David,
like-
you're right.
24 karat is the softer gold.
That's
Right.
correct.
why
The
is it?
only uses
Well,
24
because it
karat
has-
gold on our
No.
artwork.
Because it doesn't have additives to it. The gold you buy, a gold ring, it's not pure gold. It's got sigim in it.
But guess what? The gold you buy is rated. It is 10 karat gold, 18 karat gold, 24 karat gold, whatever it might be.
What does
22
that mean?
and
What does
22.
that mean?
That means we admit to having added to it a certain degree of non-gold.
Yeah, it's got
We
sigim in
admit
it.
that. So 10 karat gold doesn't sell for the same price as 23 or 22 karat gold.
That's correct. The same thing with silver. Silver is also rated.
Tell me, because I know nothing about that.
25.
Say it again. There's 920. All I know is 925 sterling.
925, I meant 925.
That's all I know. So David, seriously, tell me.
They're-
I don't know the silver is rated.
Both-
I've only seen 925.
Both of them are softer metals. And
Yes.
in order to be hard to be usable, you add other metals to it. So they both have stuff in it. Is simply incorrect, Radak.
You say the Radak is incorrect. Okay. But guess what?
Or he's correct, we're reading him wrong.
So let's read them again. David, do me a favor. You got the Sefer 357. Read from the word Sigim, which is in the next to the last paragraph on that page.
Is there a
1, 2,
parish
3,
on
4.
Radak? Is there anyone that reviews Radak? I
Me.
see what he's saying. Okay.
So read it. Read it.
Zahav kesef lo zahar zahav, shehu naki mikol hamatachot. It is the cleanest,
Purest.
the pure. So maybe it means that it's the purest of metals in general. So no, it is more of a pure metal than say silver and others, but it doesn't mean it's totally pure. Rabbi Hanani Chazal say, "Lefi shelo Yisrael dor acharon, echad shayu kazahav ela kakesef, tirkem psolet kas bahavu."
He's saying gold is the gold standard. The purity of gold.
It's gold is a standard, not because it is less impure. Gold is the standard because simply gold is a rarer metal, or for other reasons, or it has more important uses than silver, whatever. It's not because of how pure it is. Its value is because it's a rare and it's shinier and women like it. I don't know.
Probably, but it's the purest metal.
So when Naomi's got so Naomi's looking up what is the purest metal.
So that's platinum.
Platinum is the purest metal. It's more expensive than both of them.
Yeah, but then
Then
doesn't really give you.
molybdenum, I don't know, something like that. What do I know?
Gold of pure metal, it's slightly orange, dead, soft, malleable,
So,
and
but we will deal with what you said relative to the content and the people we're talking about shortly. So basically, we've read the Psukim, and there is not really a lot to say in the Mefarshim about it. This pasuk is the pasuk that was the meat of this section of Psukim. So we're going to go to now, he says, to Psukim Chaf Gimel through Lamed Aleph, which basically takes us through the Perek. And what is the subject of Chaf Gimel through Lamed Aleph? Steinsaltz says,
Wait, Brian, I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Is there anyone that says
You better
that,
have at least one answer, David.
what?
Yeah.
Is
You
there
better have at least one answer.
is there anyone that says that when God's talking about all these metals, kesef, nechoshet, barzel, oferet, ubdil, that he's talking about all the different strata of society, that the kings, the princes, the prophets, the kohanim, that each metal refers to a different layer of society. And what he's
Yes.
saying is, he's saying, you're all rotten. Doesn't matter if you're one, this, or this.
If you're less rotten than the other guy,
Yeah,
you
you're
want-
all rotten. You're all going into the fire. You're all going to be melted down.
We're all
we
going
will
to
get
hell.
down.
Yeah, you're
we'll
all
get
going to
down
be brought.
The Malbim will go through why these particular metals are used linguistically. He does talk about it. So it's an excellent question. It's even better because I have the answer. So we're going to do now Psukim Chaf Gimel through Lamed Aleph. And says Steinsaltz,
You want to read the psukim?
he says, first I want to read the introduction. It says, Hashchisus Pashta B'kol. Corruption, he says, widespread in everything. Kol mishia chola harshia marshia. Anybody who could be worse did worse. Leman betza kesef. All for the greed of money. Now you notice you could say, play on words, kesef, kesef, money and silver. The ein tzaddik sheyagein al ha'ir. And there's no tzaddik who can protect, who can act as a shield for the city. It brings me back to that chapter in Yirmiyah, where Yirmiyah, earnest Navi that he was, is challenged by the Rebbeinu Shalom. Go out into the city and find me one righteous man, one, and I won't destroy the city.
I couldn't do it.
Goes back to Avram. Avram says, will you destroy the good with the bad? He says, what if I find 50 tzaddikim, 40, 30, 20, 10? God says, knock yourself out. God said to Yirmiyah, go ahead. And the Mefarshim say, impossible. How could you not find one tzaddik in Yerushalayim? The answer was, you know what a tzaddik is? A tzaddik is a full-service yid. A tzaddik is shomer Torah mitzvos, says is melamed Torah mitzvos, mashpia. He influences on Torah and mitzvos. There wasn't one. The guy who sat in the closet in his room and learned day and night, what did he do for the population? Nothing to save them. So as Steinsaltz says over here, he says, anybody who could do worse and line his pockets did worse. Ain't tzaddik. There is not one righteous man. Not tzaddikim, tzaddik. Shia gain all year to protect the city. And if you look at Pasuk Chaf Gimel and Chaf Daled, I'm going to read in Steinsaltz how he inserts his commentary. Vidvar Shemelai Lemor, Chaf Daled. Ben Adam, Emor La, to Yerushalayim. Tell Jerusalem. At Eretz Shelo Mito Hara. Mitorah. He says, Minuka, cleansed he. It is not cleansed. Shelo Gushma Biyom Za'am. Gushma comes from the word Geshem. Geshem means rain. So I've got to assume Gushma, rinsed, cleansed, immersed. And he says his parish, Lo Yorad Alayach Geshem B'Shataf Ezuha Matech. Water did not pour down on you, he says, and wash your filth. Zuhama means filth. Zuhama means the lowest form of tumah. Nothing could wash it away. Klomar meaning nisheret, you remain, betumatech, in your impurity, Gam shekibalt ona sheikh. You got to listen to this pasuk. He says, even after you're punished, you're tameh. You don't get purified. Where do you ever hear this? God says, I'll punish you and you'll still remain impure. That's why Golus Bavel was so vitally important to the survival of Am Yisrael. They were good ones. They were the good ones. Because he's saying there was nothing good left in Eretz Yisrael. Nothing. So we continue. And we read Pasuk. So now we get into what we were saying before. We're to go into the categories of people that are involved. Pasuk Chav Hey is false prophets, but not everybody agrees with that. We'll see. Chav Vav, Kohanim, priests. Chav Zayin, princes. Chav Ches, Nevi'ei Sheker. And Chav Tes, if I remember correctly before I turn my page, Chav Ches, he says is Am Ha'aretz, that's the common man. Okay. So if we take a look at Chav Hey, false prophets, first let's read the Pasuk. Pasuk Chav Hey says, so we'll go to the right sefer. Kesher Nivieha, he says B'tocha. Kesher. Well, what does Kesher mean? Kesher says Metzudas Tzion, who is our online dictionary right on the page, says Kesher Inyan Aguda. Aguda is a union. Haskama achas. It's a union of like-minded people. Kesher Nevi'eha, and this is not Yeshaya and Yirmiyah and Yechezkel. These are the bad guys. He says this union of
Kesher is subversion.
That's
It's
not
like,
what he says.
It's like making a plot. It's like plotting to overthrow a government.
Conspiracy.
The conspiracy.
Okay. Is that what the English says?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
So English says conspiracy. I love to be corrected, but I can tell you what it says in the Metzudas Tzion, and the Metzudas Tzion precedes the art scroll. It says Kesher Inyan Aguda Haskama Echas.
Here, look Rashi. Read Rashi. Read Rashi.
He says Nikshorim Yachad Be'etza Ra'ah. So he went further, and you got it right. He says, because you read the English and I did. He says they were united in giving bad advice. Okay. Kesher Nevi'eha. Let's finish the pasuk. B'tocha Ka'ari Shoei. What's Shagas Aryeh? Yes, I know. It's a parish on the Gemara. Shagas Aryeh, he says, is the roar of a lion, Toref, Toref, that is pouncing on its prey. It says, Nefesh acholu chosen b'yikar. Nefesh, a soul that consumes power and wealth. Yikachu almanoseha. He says, the yikar yikachu, take it back, that's the way the Trupp reads, and who take power and wealth. Almanoseha hirbu b'salcha. They are widow makers. They make widows in the nation. So what do we have to say about the pasuk? We're talking about, this is discussing false prophets. So the first thing to look at is Chomas Anach on page 359 of the Hebrew Mikros Gedolos. Chomas Anach, last three lines, Chafei. He says, Kesher Nevi'eh B'Solcha. Says, Efshar, perhaps, Dahu Misna'abim Kulon B'Signon Echad. Their prophecy was all in the same style. If every Navi is saying the exact same thing, either we got a problem or they're all lying. We got a problem to giving you bad news. If they're telling you everything's going to be great, he says, they're lying. He says, and where do we get that from? That's the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Peites Amud Aleph. Shehem wrote im kesher. Listen, Shu Osios Sheker. Take kesher, spin the letters around, and you get sheker. I thought that was mega cool. Then again, I'm a sucker for this stuff. And if you see what the Abarbanel says, as soon as I can find them. I tell you, I had trouble with this particular pasuk. So I looked at a lot of people, spent a lot of time on it. The Abarbanel says, Hare, the Heim Hayu Ka'ari Shoeg Toref Teref Nefesh. Rotzalomar, meaning, Ka'ari Shehu Shoeg, the lion that roars, Yachakahu Toref Teref. Then he pounds on its prey. Kain Heim Hayu Mavhilim Ha'anashim Bekolam. They would confuse the people with their loud voices, with their prophecies. Udivreim, Bezehayu Mesisim, Mesisu Mediach. They would lead astray. It says Vitorfim Osam, and pounce on them. Lo Sheyitrafu Mamona. No. They weren't after their money. Ela nafsham b'da'atam. They were going after their spiritual lives, not the money. V'hu omro toref teref nefesh achalu. He says chosen vikar yikachu, meaning rotzalomar hanaviyim hahem achlu chosen the koach Yisrael. They took the might and the power of the Jewish nation, the chazakam and their strength, ki v'hish anam al divreihem, when we depended upon what they said, avdu hakol, everything was lost and destroyed. V'chein yikaram ukvodam v'akhu. They took their preciousness and their honor. They caused them to be destroyed. Gam almanos seha hirbu betocha, heim hayu siba l'shenehergu ha'anashim v'nesharu neshem almanos. We're going to win. Don't worry. Remember what was it? What was the nevuah in Yirmiyah? It says 2 more years. And we'll be on top and they'll be on the bottom. Don't worry about a thing. And people listened to that and they went and they got killed and there were more widows than anything else. What is this about? Nevi'ei Sheker. That's why it's the first on the list. Number 1.
Why is it repeated later then?
I will tell you.
Okay.
David, do you think I did not spend 10 hours on this today? David. Just make sure I get to the right thing.
What's this? Only 10 hours?
I tell you.
Only 10.
I didn't even watch the Met game today, David. Didn't even watch it.
Was there a Met game today?
And they lost 5-3, but let's not talk about it.
Yeah.
So, says Dr. Breuer, he seems to ask David's question. Oh my goodness. Dr. Breuer says on page 195, he says, to interpret this sentence as a description of false prophets is difficult, since these prophets will be discussed in Pasuk Chavches.
That's right.
Whoa!
You know,
While the
too.
present verse, like Psukim Gimel through Zion in Perek Yud Tes, depicts the depravity of the Jewish kings in Yechezkel's day. However, we believe we can obviate this problem by interpreting this verse and a matter supported by a similar passage in Zephaniah. Zephaniah Gimel through Dalet. Zephaniah. Yes, when we get to Trey Yasser, we'll encounter him. Okay.
Yeah,
He
because
says,
parent named Stephania.
you have a parent named Zephaniah?
The last name.
Achem Veit to the Yidden.
Stephania.
Okay. It says the reference is to those Jewish kings whom Yechezkel describes. In retrospect, Kesher Nevi'im plotting together. Kesher is a tie with the unscrupulous pseudo-prophets who were guilty of treason against the Jewish state. So he's saying, we're not talking about prophets, we're talking about kings. And does it really make sense? The answer is it really does. You know why? Because if you take that first pasuk and we talk about not prophets but kings, then the next pasuk talks about Kohanim, then it talks about princes, then it talks about Nevi'im, and then it talks about Hamonam. So it kind of makes sense in the stratification of the nation, except the fact that
kings Nevi'im.
Say it again.
Why would you refer to the kings as Nevi'im?
He refers to them as Nevi'im. He says because he says Kesher Nevi'im. He said in Kesher Nevi'im, he says Sephania. It's a reference to those kings whom Yechezkel describes in retrospect as Kesher Nevi'im. Those kings were referred to as a cohort, he says, of Nevi'im, adding together. Kesher means a tie with the unscrupulous, quote, pseudo-prophets, meaning the kings were in cahoots with the Nevi'e Sheker. So he says, this is Dr. Breuer. You know what? So you're all guys, you ask me a question. And who in God's name is Dr. Breuer? And why should I be listening to him? So I thought I would tell you something about Rabbi Dr. Joseph Breuer. He was born March 20th, 1882, and he died April 19th, 1980. Anybody who lives 98 years, I think I want to hear something about it. 98 years. Rabbi community leader in Germany and the United States. Rabbi of one of the largest Jewish synagogues, Kahaladat Yeshurun, founded by German Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi oppression that had settled in Washington Heights, New York. Following his father, Solomon Breuer's death in 1926, Joseph Breuer succeeded him as Rosh Yeshiva, which he practically had been before his father's death. In 1933, with the rise of Nazism, he briefly moved the yeshiva to Fiume, Italy, where he had assumed the rabbinate, but the arrangement lasted only until the next year, and the family and the yeshiva returned to Frankfurt. It was formally dissolved by the Nazis in 1935, but continued to function unofficially. On the day after Kristallnacht, Breuer was arrested but subsequently released. I ask you a question. Released? Who got released?
From the Nazis.
After Kristallnacht, who got released? You talk about Nisim and the flows. The family left Germany initially to Antwerp. A former pupil was then, with the assistance of Bernard Revel. Does that name ring a bell to anybody? Bernard Revel. His name is associated with the graduate schools in Yeshiva University. He was offered a teaching position in his institution, which would be precursor of Yeshiva University, which he brusquely turned down. He reportedly said,
Yes, Bernard Revel, founder of YU.
yes, he said, he reportedly said, Dr. Breuer, he'd rather clean the streets. Quote, I'll show it to you. Look it up on Wikipedia. Breuer was well known for his involvement in setting up an Orthodox Jewish infrastructure in post-World War II America. He wrote several books, including translations of and commentaries on Yirmiyah and Yechezkel. English translations of these appeared after his death. Breuer is considered the main post-war representative of Torah in Derech Eretz movement in the United States. Apart from these books, he limited his written work to contributions to the community organ, which was called, Mitteilungen. Some appeared in book form after his death. His influence was mainly due to his public speeches and his indefatigable work on the community's services. A number of important ideas can be distinguished. Listen first.
Community organ?
Say it again.
Community
Organ.
what?
Yes, he
We'll
was
talk
against
about
the
that.
organs. He was against the organs in churches in Germany, which were very prevalent among the Reforms.
Churches are in shuls.
In shuls, churches. Okay. Independent orthodoxy. Breuer drew on his grandfather's work of Austritt, the principle that Jewish communities can only truly claim to be Jewish. They're ideologically and otherwise independent from organizations that represent ideals contrary to halacha. In America, where the community organization was not enforced by local law, this became, in Breuer's mind, an even stronger issue than in Europe. This stance also led to his involvement with Agudas Yisrael of America. He was stridently opposed to a Zionist state and refrained from visiting Israel. Torah and Derech Eretz, Breuer saw the risk of misinterpretation of his grandfather's ideas. You know who his grandfather was? Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, on how Judaism could be harmonized within limits with general culture of the outside world. He repeatedly stated that compromising on Jewishness and halacha was at variance with Torah and Derech Eretz. With the rise of the yeshiva movement, he also remarked that Torah and Derech Eretz was by no means a unique temporary measure, as was often claimed by protagonists of the Torah-only view. Torah only is opposed to Torah and Derech Eretz. Kosher v'yosher. Although one of the phenomena of post-World War II Orthodoxy has become the reintroduction of stringencies in halacha, Breuer held that these should not be limited to the ceremonial sphere, but also to the many financial and social laws of Judaism. He would, for example, refuse a hechsher to companies with bad financial records. In other words, a richtige yeka. He was a real yeka. But in any event, we read his parish because he was a pioneer of American halachic Judaism. So I try, hopefully every week I'll be able to bring something about some of the mafarshim that we talk about. So we talked about Pasuk Chafei. So he said, so Breuer doesn't like that fact. It says Nevi'im. He says there were malachim in cahoots with Nevi'im. Now, Pasuk Chavav is fairly clear. It says, Kohanim chamsu sorasi. They violated my Torah. V'yachalalu kadoshi. He say, bein kodesh lechol lo hivdilu. They bein kodesh lechol lo hivdilu. He says they desecrated my sanctities and they made no distinction bein kodesh lechol. It sounds a lot like Rabbi Breuer, to be honest with you, from what I've just read. His tinus, bein atamei latahar lo hidiu. He said they made no distinction in tamei and tar. Ishab so sai ha'alimu einehem. He says, and they averted their eyes from the requirements of Shabbos. V'achal b'socham, achal b'socham. And thus says the Ribbono Shel Olam, I was profaned in their midst. Like I said, saying that this is the most human, quote unquote, approachable, understandable, relatable God. Think about your own anger about any issue and look at the way the Ribbono Shel Olam Kav Yachol, how upset he is with what has gone on and how he reacts. It doesn't justify what we do. So he says, Kohanim in Pasuk Chav Vav, Rabbi Eliezer says about that. If I turn the page, he says, Chamsu sorasi. They perverted my Torah. They extorted my Torah. He says, Asauha Torah Chamas. They made it the Torah of Chamas, not Chumas. Kishehein ba'alei Torah b'chomesin sha'ar ha'am spurin shekatorah yasu. They set the wrong example. If you see the frummest guy in your neighborhood going into Nathan's and eating a hot dog with a yarmulke on,
That's a Kohen.
and Naomi says, and he's a Kohen. he say, whoa, I must have not read the whole book. And he probably did. You set the wrong example, people follow you. That's Kohanim. And the next pasuk, Chav Zayin, says, Soreha b'kirba kize'evim Torfei Toreth. And David, I will go back to your question when we finish this. He says, Soreha, the officers, the princes within it, Kisavim, were like wolves. Torfei Tereth. He said that pounced on their prey, the shvachdam, just to spill blood, for the sport of it. La beid nefashos laman botza botza. And the translation says, the princes in its midst are like wolves going forth in search of prey to shed blood, to destroy human lives in order to snatch gain. Chav Zion. The Malbim says about this, but I first should tell you what the Malbim says in answer to what David brought up. Is there a reason, is there a parallel to all of these nettles that are being brought up? And the Malbim, if you look in the Mikros Gedolos, page 359, the last paragraph, Chaf Hey, and he says, Kesher, Atah Choshev Arba Minei Hasigim. Let's look at the 4 types of impurities. Hanechoshes, Haim, Kesher Nivi'ei HaSheker. The copper, he says, is the alliance, the union of Nevi'ei HaSheker, She'oskim B'nichush. Nechoshes, Nichush was divination with snakes.
Yeah.
He says the kesem is necromancy. So he says Kesher Nevi'ei HaSheker is that. He says Domim Ka'arye Shoeg L'Trof Teref, that the Ari, says the lion, Bidas, the Ace Yishak Yeshlo Teref Kamosha Ne'amar. Well, a lion only pounces if there is prey present. Hayishag, he says, Amos, Hayishag Aryeh B'Ya'ar B'Toraf Ein Lo. Is a lion going to roar in the wilderness? He said, if there's nothing to pounce on. And he says, V'chein Heim Be'es Sha'agu V'Yinabu Tarfu Teref. He says, they would roar and they would prophesy and then they would snatch their prey. Aval ha'ari torev basar ugviyah behem nefesh ochlu. A lion goes after food. They were going after the souls. She'achlu is hanefesh haruchan yis. They were consuming the spiritual soul. Ki achtium b'nafsho sam. They caused them to sin for their souls. And we turn the page to get to this pasuk in the Malbim on page 360, Chav Vav, Kohaneha, Heim Hayu HaBedil. Bedil we said was tin, I believe. Ki Osam Hivdil Hashem, divided the Adas Yisrael. Bedil, Hivdil, cute. He says, V'yibadel Aharon, Lahakti Sho, Kodesh Kedashim. And he tells you 3 different things. And the third line, Aleph, Lamed es HaTorah Kamoshe Ne'amar. He says, is Vehem Chamasu, skip 2 lines, Torah C. They're supposed to teach Torah, they perverted it. Beis, L'shmoras HaMikdash and Kiddushav, to watch the Beis HaMikdash and the Kodshim. Vehem Chilalu, he says, Kodshi, he ben Kodesh L'chol Lo Hivdilu. And they profaned it because they didn't respect the distinctions between Kodesh and Chol. At the end of the line is really the third. Below Nizharu Betuma Betahara. It says, Gam Beshabso Sai Elimu Einehem. He says, and they also looked away, averted their eyes from Shabbos. Lo his hero al Chilul Shabbos, Sheshakul Keneged Kol HaTorah. So next to Chav Zayin, what does he say about that? He says, Soreh B'Kirba, Hemayu HaBarzel. How fitting. Shia Mateches HaYoser Chazak HaHoreg Nefashos. Because iron is the strongest metal. It makes swords out of steel and it kills. Hemayu kize'evim. He says, Yesh hevdel bein ha'aryeh v'haze'ev. There's a difference between a wolf and a lion. Aryeh eno toref es adam, rak be'ez ra'avo. No, a lion is hungry, he goes after and he hunts. Aval haze'ev toref pounces, ishpoch dam, for the sport of spilling blood. Gam kishe eno ra'ev, even if he's not hungry. Or you shovchim dam, or kedei la'abed nafshos, or lematan betzoa betza, or to steal money, to kill or to steal. Now go to Pasuk Ches. It says we're almost done. Chav Ches. He says Uneviyeha. Now we come back to Nevi'im again. Tachu lahem tafel chozim, and tachu lahem. He says they covered for them with whitewash that does not last. In other words, they whitewashed over something to pretend they were covering a hole, but paint doesn't seal a hole. Or they used inferior materials that could not do the job. The kosnim mahem kazav, they fancy nothingness. Omrim ko amar Hashem Elokim v'Hashem lo diber. They said, God said this, and God didn't say this. That is possibly the greatest sin of all. It said, God said this, and God never said this. Now we go into Pasuk Chavtes, and Chavtes is who? Am ha'aretz, you and me. Oshku oshek the gazlu gazl. He said, curtail the rights of the neighbors, commit robbery. It says, Ve'ani ve'evyon honu. They offend the poor and the needy and oppress the stranger in violation of the law.
Which pirush are you reading?
Say it again, please.
Which pirush are you reading now?
I was reading in Rabbi Breuer's Rabbi Hirsch Parish, because that's the one that came to my hand. I have too many Sfarim open, Baruch Hashem. So let's go to the last pasuk, Chavtes. Yes, Mitzudas Tzion says on pasuk Chavtes, Honu, they loshon Oma, the Mamon. That's usury. That's profiting. That was their sin. He says they took profits, they stole that way, the gospel, and they stole. And they perverted the rights of the most defenseless people in society. Ani ve'evyon. There's a ger who we are told to look out for. Oshku below mishpat. There's no law in the land. It's the Wild West, and they did what they wanted to. So he says, Pasuk Lamed, Avakesh mehem ish, go there, go there. Says, I'm asking them for one man ready to erect the fence and place himself in the breach before me. Who will stand up? Who will be the voice of law and order? Ba'ad ha'aretz, for the sake of the land, lebilti shachasa, so I should not destroy it. Who will stand up and protect Klal Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael? Below Motzasi. Now remember, when Yirmiyah did it, Yirmiyah couldn't find it. But this isn't Yirmiyah. This is God. God couldn't find one upright person for whom Eretz Yisrael and Klal Yisrael was worth saving.
What about Yechezkel himself? What about Yechezkel
No,
himself?
Yechezkel was in Bavel.
What about
Yechezkel was
Yirmiyah?
not in Eretz Yisrael.
Wasn't Yirmiyah in Eretz Yisrael then?
Yirmiyah was in Eretz Yisrael. Yirmiyah was killed following, I think, Paro wanted him, Paro Necho wanted him for a tzatzkala. He liked him around, but ultimately he was assassinated. But
So was Yirmiyah no longer alive because Yechezkel's prophesizing for a place he's not in?
Yirmiyah was alive then. There was a span of, they overlap.
Overlap.
This is the Babel side of the Yirmiyah prophecy.
Right.
So let's continue. So he says, I couldn't find anyone. And the Malbim says, Vavakesh, meaning Animshol Shalomotza Kesben Hasigim. What do we start out with? We're looking to find silver in the impurities, and I couldn't find any silver, says God. Shebikesh ish sheyigdor geder litakein, to repair haprotzos. He says the breaches, the eshador, the generation. Oh, al kol ponim she'amod b'peretz. Only stand up, put yourself in harm's way. That since he's a tzaddik, his zechuyos will protect the generation. Below yitain hamashkis lavo, and will prevent the destroyer from coming. Below matzah. God couldn't find anyone. God couldn't find anyone. So finally, the last pasuk. I'll pour out my fury, the Aish of Rasi, in my fiery anger. Kili sim. I will destroy them. That means I will annihilate them. That means I will eliminate them from the face of the earth. Kalis means to end. Darkem Rosham Nosati. I put it in their own hands and it's on their own head. Hashem Elohim. Again, a terribly sad parallel to Abraham and Yirmiyah. Avram was convinced 10 tzaddikim in the city. He says, where Lot was living, I couldn't find 10 tzaddikim. God says, Yirmiyah, go out to the street. He got to nobody. So what choice does God have? I mean, we could have a whole discussion. Does this give God any joy? I don't believe it does. And remember where we said in the beginning of the sheet, we said that God separated out, I won't say the best, but the better, and brought them to Bavel. That ensures the perpetuation and the proliferation of Jewish society and Jewish learning. But you'll also remember that we learned to the great disappointment and anger in Yeshayahu when the call went out, all clear, come on back down to Eretz Yisrael. They were so rich in Bavel that 13,000 people returned out of who knows how many 100,000. And among them, for the 13,000, there were 5,000 slaves. So think about that. 13,000, that means a ratio of 8 to 5 citizens to slaves, servants that came back. Said, and the rest of them wouldn't come. Guys, it's not the happiest story. But Zet Torah see, this is God's Torah and we got to learn it. That's what we're doing. And one day, happy days will be here again. Everybody.
Yeah, this will make you happy. Let's see if I can do this. See if I can do this. I don't know. There we go. In front of my house 2 days ago.
I can't. What?
I'm trying to see if you can get it. You can't.
All right. Send it to me. Send it to me. I'll send it to the group.
I'll send it to you.
What are you showing?
In front of my house, a little animal.
A lion?
Not quite. A bear.
Okay.
Ryan, what did you say?
A bear.
Big bear.
A big bear came in front of David's house. David lives on the edge of a nature preserve.
It's
Where?
cool.
I thought he was going to say a shua.
No, Aryeh Shag. So we had a big bear that came by.
Beautiful. Everybody, Zaymer
Bear
Gesund.
once went trotting through my son's yard
Where was that?
up in Muncie.
Okay.
I don't
Probably
know,
the
guys.
same bear.
All I have are gardeners trotting through the yard over here. Everybody be well. Thank you for joining. Have a great night.
Have a
Okay,
good
thank you, Brian. Shkoyach.
Good
See you
night.
later.
See you tomorrow morning.
Yep.
I'll send you the bear.
please.